Hey team, Adam from Built Beyond 40 here. All right, welcome back to the channel. I'm guessing you've had a look through all the other material. You're getting all the theory stuff together, okay, on what it takes to actually build some strength and muscle beyond 40 years of age. All right, so today what I want to talk to you about is cycled intensity. All right, now I've mentioned it before. It's also sort of been called intensity variation. You can use either term. I think intensity variation kind of will give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. So, look, we're always bombarded with images of guys in the gym, you know, really pushing it hard, talking about how you've got to give it your all every workout, day in, day out, year in, year out. And this is, in a way, a little bit misleading because, especially if you're not using performance enhancing substances, okay, and even if you are to a certain extent, it's actually really difficult, I should say impossible, to train at 100% intensity all the time. In fact, if that's what you're going to try and do, then you might as well forget about any muscle or strength increases in the near future. Because as you've heard me talk about it before, you put a lot of stress on your nervous system, okay? You build up a lot of systemic fatigue. And if you don't manage fatigue and you're not recovering properly, then there's really no way that you can gain any significant amount of strength and muscle long term. Okay, so if we look at the scale and we look at very little effort, very little intensity at 1%, and we look at maximal effort, maximal intensity at 100%, what we want to do then is structure our workouts over successive training blocks, ranging, usually I start at around about 60%. So I'll start a new training cycle at around 60% of load and intensity. And then over subsequent weeks, I will build that intensity up back to 100%. Now that 100% will represent my previous best. Okay, the last intense workout that I took before I deloaded or lowered the intensity again. So the best way I can describe this to you or explain it is through an example. Let's take the bench press, okay? So let's say that on your last strength cycle, so the last workout in a training block where you were going maximal effort, really pushing to that point, pretty much to that point of failure where you just couldn't get another rep out with, let's say, 100 kilos, you managed to get 100 kilos for 7 reps on your bench press, which is really impressive, okay? Now, you know that probably if you trained another week and tried to get 100 kilos for 8, or you added that little piece of iron, remember, a half kilo or a quarter kilo to the bar, even if you did that, you probably would struggle and push yourself into overtraining. So what you do then is the following week, you start at 60%. Okay, so it's kind of like downshifting gears in a car. So we're going to bring that intensity down. And what we do is our bench pressing session will be at 60% of our max effort. So at 60% of 100 kilos, we're going to be bench pressing 60 kilos for 7 reps. Now, that's going to feel real easy. And that's awesome because it's supposed to feel really easy. That's the whole point. Because what we're doing in this part of our training block is we're allowing our nervous system, we're allowing muscles, joints, ligaments, we're allowing all of that to recover. Okay, so we go through that week, our bench press, 60%, 60 kilos, 7 reps. Awesome. Our next week, we up the intensity. I might like to take 10% jumps. So the next week will be 70%. So we come into our bench pressing session and what do? We do 70 kilos for 7 reps. Great, still feels pretty easy. And again, it's supposed to. The easier weeks, okay, the deloaded, easier 60, 70, even up to 80% weeks, They're supposed to feel easy because not only are they allowing us to recover, right? But what they're also allowing us to do is practice technique, practice getting our form down perfectly when it doesn't really matter, because we're not pushing, we're not looking to increase weights or reps. We're just looking to practice technique and recover. The following week, I come in bench pressing session. Now it's starting to get moderately hard because now I'm at 80%. So I'm 80 kilos for 7 reps. I blast out that session. Okay. Following week, now we're upping the stakes. We're coming to 90%. This is going to start to feel a little bit more difficult now, okay? Bang, 90 kilos, 7 reps, done. Now, the following week, we come back to 100%, which was where we left off, our previous best. All right, but now we're in a very different position than when we were when we did that 100 kilos for 7 reps. Because at the end of that session, that was the end of our training block, the end of our strength block, and we were feeling it, right? We're feeling like, body's a little bit beat up, probably don't have another week at high intensity. Now you're in a very different position because you've had all of that lead up, okay? You've had all of that rest and recovery whilst you've been maintaining, recovering, and practicing technique. Now, when you get to 100 kilos for 7 reps, you're in a very different position to where you were all those weeks ago because now you're a lot fresher, okay? You're a lot more recovered. So that 100 kilos for 7, although it's going to be a good test, you're going to finish that session knowing that you've got A, more weight, and B, more reps in the tank coming over the next. Usually once I hit my 100%, I like to hang in there for like 2 to 3 weeks. So once I blast that 100% session, then I'll come back the next week and I'll do either try for 100.5 kilos for 7 reps, or I might try and do 100 kilos for 8 reps, add another rep. Whether it's a little bit of weight or an extra rep, this is the time in these next 2 to 3 weeks. These are the time that is assigned to progress. So what you're doing then is you'll get to that end of this strength session and you may have ended up doing 101 or 101.5, or you may have really pushed and got 102 kilos for 7 reps. So you finish this strength session 2 kilos further up on your bench press than where you were before. And then you just keep stacking those small increments on top of each other over successive training blocks. Now, if you start at 60% and you give yourself 3 weeks at high intensity, so you have 60%, 70%, 80, 90, 100, that's 5 weeks. Then you have another 3 weeks where you're going all out. That's an 8-week training block. Okay, now you can get, 5, 6 of these in a year. Now, if you're able to add, and I'm being very conservative here, if at the end of these training blocks, you're able to add 2 to 3 kilos on big lifts, 4 kilos on big lifts. If you multiply that by the number of actual training cycles that you have during the year, it adds up to being a lot of iron. Like, if you have 6, 7 training blocks a year and you're adding 2 or 3 kilos a time, that's anywhere from 14 to 20 kilos on a bench press, for example. How many of you guys out there have added almost a full plate to your bench press at the end of a training year? I'm guessing very few of you, okay? I rarely see it. Look, this is the way that you need to move through the months of your training months throughout the year, because trying to go balls to the wall all the time will just lead you into stagnation and overtraining and going absolutely nowhere. So you can do this with all your major lifts, all your compound lifts, your dips, your squats, your leg presses, your rows, deadlifts, stiff-legged, Romanian, all the big compound movements, shoulder presses. You progress all these lifts the same way. You work them in cycles over a training year, okay? So cycled intensity or intensity variation is the key. I'm going to hit more on this later on. And then, as the channel progresses, I'm going to do these workouts for you guys. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Right now, in my cycle, I'm up to about 80%. So I've got another week at about 90, and then I'll be back up there hitting big weights again, and I'm going to film some of these sessions. All right, Remember, cycled intensity, small poundage progression. That's the way to go for long-time strength gains and muscle. All right, guys, until I see you again, bye-bye.